Hello everyone, transport enthusiast here, and today I will be showing you how Microsoft Flight Simulator runs on a low-spec PC. So recently Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 was released just today on the 18th of August, and probably what some of you at least will be wondering is whether you can run this on your PC at all, and if so, how well this will run if you are at the minimum system requirements or within that range. So currently the system we are running here is we have a Intel processor, an i5 3570, 3.4 GHz and then 3.8 GHz at turbo speed, which is slightly better than the minimum stated on the requirements for this game, which I think is an i5 4460. So we're in between. We're kind of in between the minimum and the recommended. Then we have a NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1050 2GB VRAM graphics card. Thanks to Inside Gamer for actually providing me with that graphics card. And then we also are on 16GB of RAM, so we're on the recommended RAM level, but we're on the minimum spec for the graphics card, and we're about at the minimum spec for the processor. So, as you all know, those are the minimum specs. So when we load in the game, you will now see that even with minimum specs, the game does run quite well. And it's really just about finding the optimal setting points. So I'm just going to show you here what is going to happen. Now, one of the interesting things though about this is that actually, even though I have corroborated with can I run it and corroborated with the system, manually by eye, when I load up Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, it will tell us that we do not meet the recommended, we do not need the minimum system requirements, even though we do. However, even if you do get this message, this is not something to worry about. All it does is it indicates it may crash for you, something I have not experienced yet. And even with this message, the game still runs fine once it's loaded up. Now, obviously, the way this performance is going to work on Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 may vary from system to system, naturally, and depending on the kind of setup you use. But generally, if you're using any graphics card like the NVIDIA GTX 77 or more above, so anything more recent than that, with at least 2GB of VRAM, should work fine for you. And likewise, if you're on the AMD side, if you're using anything that's above an AMD RX 570 or 2GB or above, this should run not too bad for you. However, it should run fine for you. However, if you are in doubt, there is a few useful websites that show you how well exactly your PC will run it with your graphics card. So, for example, when I looked this up, I can't remember the name of the website. I think it was either Can You Run It or the Game Debate. It showed us that the 1050 we can expect to run about I think it was 60 FPS on low settings, graphical settings. About I think it was 47 FPS on medium graphical settings, 30 FPS on high graphical settings, and about 20 on minimum. So if you do want to see how well your graphics card will perform before you decide whether to invest the €70 or €120, depending on which packages you're going for, it might be advisable to check on those websites how well your graphics card will perform. One thing to note is that while 2GB of VRAM is the requirement, some graphics cards that are older than the GTX 1050 or the AMD RX 570 will not be able to run the game well, in spite of having 2GB of VRAM. So one example of this is I was using an AMD 7800 HD series that came out in 2012, and even though that graphics card had 2GB of VRAM, when you ran it through Can You Run It, it says that it does not meet the minimum requirements because of the pixel shaders, and also when playing with it, we were getting very low FPS and experience that was, well, not very playable. So that is just one thing to bear in mind. Now, we're just obviously waiting here for Microsoft Flight Simulator to load up, so I might just do that again quickly. Second time's the charm. So that is one thing to bear in mind, is that if your graphics card is one of the earlier versions than the benchmarks listed as the minimum requirements, you may have some issues with loading the game. However, anything that's more recent than the the GTX 1050 or the RX 570 should be run no bother. Now, if you bear with me here, once this loads up, I just want to show you the message we get, just to show you that it doesn't always have an impact as long as you have corroborated whether to Can You Run It or to doing it yourself, that you meet the minimum system requirements. Yeah. Okay, I know we're 5 minutes in and we're only now getting into the game, so but I will show you now how it runs. So as you can see here, warning, your computer does not meet the minimum requirements. As a result, you may experience errors during the game. I am not quite sure why it is displaying this, since I, for a fact, know it does meet the minimum requirements, but either way, if you get this message, you will see that as long as you've corroborated, as I said, if it meets the minimum requirements, it shouldn't be an issue. And now I'll show you how this works as well. So I'll also show you the settings I'm using, just so you can deduce from that what kind of settings you may want to use. And this is one of the things about this game, Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. Even though it may seem like you might need a high-end PC, this actually runs quite fine, and you can actually run some fairly smooth graphics on this, even if you don't have a very high-end PC. For instance, once we load in, you'll see my settings that we actually have the building set to high, and we've kind of mixed matched all the settings, although you can obviously try out medium high as you wish. The other thing to bear in mind is obviously your performance will vary depending on where you load in. So some areas naturally will be laggier than other areas. That is just something to bear in mind. So obviously areas with a lot of detail, I know some people talk about, I think with Manhattan, New York, you will might experience drop in performance compared to other areas that wouldn't have as much detail. Okay, so once this loads in, we will get to it. And then also currently, one thing to bear in mind is that we're running this at a 1980 times what was it? 1980 times 1080 resolution. So I think that's 1080p. So as you can see at 1080p, you should have no problems running this. Obviously, you're not going to be able to run this on 4K with low specs, but the thing is, bear in mind that with low specs, you can get a very enjoyable experience. And also, guys, if you have any questions, or if you're wondering whether your system can run it, or you want any links to the websites, I will have some of those in the description that you can use to check this stuff. But if you have any questions or were wondering whether your setup might work, do post down below and I will see what I can do for you, and I'll see if I can be able to assist you in any way or shape or form. So the other thing to bear in mind is obviously that one thing this game actually warns you itself is that if you set it to basically the more detailed you set the graphics to, so let's say medium, high, ultra, the longer the latent time, the longer the loading time will be subsequently. So that's another thing to bear in mind. This game is also available on the Xbox Game Pass, so if you are running on a minimum spec PC, something I would advise is that you do probably get it on the Game Pass first before actually investing full price in it, because obviously you want to make sure you can run it on a playable experience and that it will meet your needs, because at €70 it is a bit of a steep investment to be making without having the full prior knowledge of whether this will run well or not on your own PC. And also the other thing is, like, this game obviously is going to be getting updated constantly, and one thing to bear in mind is how long will each PC setup be able to run this if it's on minimum requirements. But anyhow, we are just waiting for this here. So obviously, guys, I will have timestamps. So if I know some of you are probably just going to want to skip through to the part where we actually play the game and you can experience for yourselves what kind of level of detail we can get. So I will have the timestamps in the description. So if you don't want to listen, or the stuff that you are hearing here is not relevant to you, do skip ahead to the timestamps. I will have the specs in the description, and so you can make a educated guess to how your performance may be on your own setup. The other thing to bear in mind is obviously performance. Since we're recording with OBS, you may the way it appears in the video may be slightly worse than actually the gameplay experience itself, and that's obviously because we are using extra CPU power to record this. And yeah, as you can see, this is taking a bit of a while to load up, so we're just going to check how our PC is being optimized. So currently our CPU is at 95%, so obviously it's so obviously that's probably why it's taking a bit longer to run. GPU is at 78%, and you're currently using over 1.5 out of 2 gigabytes, and then RAM's at 44%. So you can run this with 8 gigabytes of RAM, that is the minimum. How it will run with 8 gigabytes of RAM, I am not too sure. However, ideally it is recommended to have 32 gigabytes of RAM, but with 16 gigabytes of RAM, it should work fairly fine for you. and you know, RAM is one of those things that's probably easier to upgrade than other things because it's cheaper to upgrade, that kind of thing. Yes, so I do apologize that we're a bit kind of stuck here on the loading screen for a fair while. So what I might do is I might just pause this, and then once we're into the actual main menu, I will resume. So I'm just going to pause this here. No, not stop recording, just pause. Okay, so we are now into the main menu of Flight Simulators. So if you go into our options here, as you can see, if we go into our general, the best thing to do is, if you want a minimum spec, is basically to trial and error, because it's automatically, the game's going to set everything to really low, and you know, while it is playable at really low, if everything sets to low, the experience is not exactly enjoyable, to say the least. It kind of looks very FSX-y. So you know, basically, like, you know, FXX, while it was definitely a product of its time, in this day and age is quite outdated the way it looks. So as you can see here, we have our VSync is off, so you can turn on VSync, but it's recommended that if you're running on 2 GB of VRAM and you know it's running at more than 100% VRAM, which if you're having 2 GB of VRAM it will do, it's recommended to keep VSync off, so that's why we've turned it off there. We have a render scaling at 100. This is all TAA. We have terrain level of detail at 95. We have our vector data at medium, buildings at high, trees at medium. You can set grass to high, but to be honest, with grass I'd say it's better off leaving it at low. It's not the most important detail, and it will impact performance generally, so it's better to keep grass at low. It's not really that much needed. We have object level detail 100. As you can see here, we have our clouds at medium, and then we've set our shadow maps. I've set the shadows to low because, to be honest, for me it's more about seeing the scenery rather than the shadows. I can survive at the shadows, but of course you can experiment how it works. But as you can see, these are the settings here, and of course you can pause this video to take a closer look at how it looks. Okay. So I'm just going to discard here because we're not changing any settings. So now what we will do is we will just load in, and I'm going to do two. So I'm going to load in with a airliner, and then I will also load in with a normal plane. We'll do like a Cessna propeller plane. So we'll do the propeller plane first. So let's say London, because that's probably going to be more. Yeah, obviously we need London's obviously. London City's probably going to be a bit laggy. So let's do Gatwick, London. So it should be fairly detailed. So you should see that it runs fine. That's all fine. So let's go into flight. Now, one thing to bear in mind is that when you're kind of setting it at medium, what you may experience is that for the first 20 to 30 seconds, the game may be a bit stuttery, but that's just on startups. But if you give it about 30 seconds, afterwards performance is fine. You will be getting at least 30 FPS stable, as long as you stay within the medium range. And the medium range does really offer quite a playable experience. You know, you can set the buildings to high, because, you know, obviously the buildings do appear much more aesthetically pleasing when you set them to high. But that's the thing. So as long as you keep it within medium, maybe just bar the buildings, which I would recommend setting to high just for that extra experience. If your graphics card can handle it, then you will have no problems with performance. You should be getting about 30 FPS, which is quite reasonable. I know some people like playing at higher FPS, but for me, 30 FPS I think is perfectly fine. So now you're going to see we're going to load into London, and hopefully it's not going to overload my CPU or overload the encoder. So I do apologize that we're here at 13 minutes and we still haven't actually gone into the gameplay element, but now when we load in, we will be back. We will be into the gameplay element, and then I might just quickly load in the airliner afterwards. I won't do much commentary there. You'll just be able to see that it flies as well. So I will probably load the airliner into, let's say, Berlin, just to show you that you know, it works on different areas on the planet as well. Okay. So that's the thing, and then that's the thing, as you can see, because I myself don't know why that message appeared there, but as you can see, even if you're getting these messages, whether as long as you know your system meets the minimum requirements, it should be running it fine. I'm not so sure if your system is not meeting the minimum requirements, then it might be a bit sketchy. But to be honest, I think the minimum requirements, I know with some games the minimum requirements are not should be taken as, you know, shouldn't be taken as for necessarily at face value, because obviously they are an estimate. But what I think with this game, FS2020, the minimum requirements are fairly accurate. So they fairly accurately indicate whether you'll be able to play with a playable experience or not. So That's the thing. I would recommend that you're within the minimum requirements before even considering doing a purchase, just so you make sure that you can actually have a playable experience. And that's the really handy thing. You can get this on Xbox Game Pass, as I have done here, just to test how it runs and just to see if it will be a playable experience before actually making the investment. Okay, so obviously since London's probably more detailed, it's going to take us slightly longer to load in. And we're just going to do a quick takeoff. I'm literally going to do like probably 2-3 minutes. We're going to take off. I'm going to fly about like the buildings at low height. And you can see even at low height, there's barely any lag experienced. The other thing is, for both NVIDIA and AMD graphics cards, there have been drivers released. So you have driver support specifically for this game, Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. So you do want to ensure that you have those installed for your graphics card, because that will obviously maximize your performance and stability. Okay. There we go. Oh, it's nighttime. Okay, obviously now it's nighttime. I didn't realize it was nighttime. This might impact performance. I had no idea it's nighttime. That might change things, hopefully not. So I think this is playing in real time for some reason. So obviously now I'm just gonna have to leave this for a minute or two. That's the thing. This is at nighttime, so I haven't tried this in nighttime. Nighttime, obviously you might experience slightly lagger gameplay, hopefully not. So that's the other thing, I'm going to set it to daytime, because realistically I think most people will probably be looking at playing daytime, just because that way you can appreciate the scenery more. But as you can see, even now when you're playing at nighttime, we're not having no performance issues whatsoever. The recording may be stuttering, but that's more on the end of OBS. That's more because Windows 10 automatically prioritizes the game over OBS. Let me just check. Yeah, so as you can see, it's fine. So as you can see here, the building detail is quite high. Do pardon my flying. It's been 5 years since I've properly played a flight simulator, so that obviously is going to cause a slightly less realistic. As you can see, we are getting a stable FPS. I'm not quite sure what it is, but it's running fairly well. So even a minimum spec PC, you can run. You don't have to run the lowest graphics. You can run medium graphics, and it runs fairly okay. So obviously it's a bit glitchy and laggy here. That is mainly because we are using we are at night time. But even so, even at night time, as you can see, performance isn't bad. It's quite playable. It is quite playable. Obviously you can make your own deductions. I know for some people the 30 FPS may not be what they are consider playable, so obviously you can just view the gameplay and make your own deduction as to how you find the experience. So there you have it. As you can see, we aren't running into any particular problems. OBS isn't even being overloaded, so it's running quite fine, even below on the ground. Can't really complain. Okay, now what I'm just going to do is I'm going to do the same thing with the airliner, just because I want to show you that, even in daytime especially, because that's when most people, I presume, are flying. There's no problems with performance really. Now that's the other thing to bear in mind is obviously the airliners, so the big jets like the Airbus A320 or the Boeing 747. I think there was there an Embraer or was there a Bombardier private jet, one of those planes, the smaller C jets. They will obviously impact performance more because they are just heavier. But if we go into our main menu, where's our main menu? Now we want to go to welcome. If we go to our world map, if we select the runway here, Berlin. Let's do Berlin-Feld. That shall do us. Then if we select our aircraft, the airliners, let's do the Airbus A320 Neo. Now how do I set this? No, I want to set the time. That should be fine. So now that should be daytime. And we have live traffic. We said obviously the other thing is I haven't talked about internet connection here, but the internet connection yeah, we'll leave this in because obviously if you have multiplayer that might impact performance. That's not too important. Anyway, let's just get with this flight. So that's one of the other things to bear in mind is that this does stream. So Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 streams all the world data from the Bing Maps API. So obviously you need an internet connection. Now you can cap how much internet Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 uses. There's settings for that as well. So that's not something I have tackled in this video because I think most people see the PC specs, specifically about the hardware that they're concerned about. But if you're having connection issues, you can cap how much internet is being used. And then obviously turning off live kind of AI traffic, that might also help because also that has to be streamed off the internet as well. So now once we load into Berlin-Feld, you will see that even with the Airbus A320 Neo, the airliner, we will get a stable experience. We might get a bit of stuttering or lag at the first 10-20 seconds while the game fully loads, but after that performance is fairly smooth, it's fairly playable, and again even on minimum specs you can get at least on medium settings, which are quite enjoyable and do offer you a pleasant gaming experience. So there's not really much more left for me to say, so I am going to just mute the microphone there, and then I will just let you see for yourselves how performance is, and you can make your own evaluation based on that. So guys, I hope you found this video helpful, and if you're having any issues or if you have any queries, don't hesitate to let me know in the comment section down below, and I will do my best to help you out. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a like, and if you aren't already, you can always subscribe to this channel for more Flight Simulator 2020 content, as well as other simulator games. That's it for now, and I will just leave this there, but until next time.